Another Holocaust poem. I watch them line up, arc-like, 2 by 2, chatting quietly. And after the teacher passes, one pushes, and the one pushed begins the chase. This is how the orphans marched through Warsaw in 42, I tell the behaved ones, orderly and under orders. And I'm about to begin that horrific story, the one they don't yet know, when I pause to open the door for a little air. And there they are again, arms akimbo like 2 stooges, the angel of death and the angel of forgetfulness, those vaudeville comics, those incorrigible face-making kids stuck forever, you first, no you, in the undersized doorframe of the museum I will, for lack of a better word, call childhood. 2. Did I say angels? Clearly, I meant my great aunts who you haven't yet met. My sister called them, from this you should know, and may you never forget. I preferred horseradish and charoset, that bittersweet matzah sandwich munched at Pesach between prayers. Everyone I knew was still alive, and no one cared that in Venice that very summer, Ginsburg, in the name of the Jews, forgave pounds. Hadn't I forgone my own bar mitzvah for a weekend in Miami Beach with that Borscht Belt South social director and shuffleboard champ? First shtick, there's no business like show business. Soon after, Lillian Hellman ushered her de-Judaicized Anne Frank onto the stage. 3. Are you writing another Holocaust poem, my son asks. He's gauging my anger at this interruption. A love sonnet, less so. But it takes $8 of gas just to get to his summer job. To hell with the poem. I need me some shekels, he sings, misquoting both Ravikovich and Snoop Dogg. Poetry was nowhere in my father's house, nor money either. Our doorposts marked Passover. Although in a pinch, Dad could recite Kipling's Gunga Din. Make fun if you must, my mother says, but look in the mirror. And I'm here to tell you that your father was a better man than all those anti-Semitic Pounds and Elliots rolled up into one. 4. That was 23 years ago, before my mother, cradling his neck and not yet crying, waited, while outside in East New York the ambulance raced and the angel of death loitered. Are you comfortable, she asks, adjusting my father's pillow, while he, ever the MC, mimicked Henny Youngman's, I make a living. Poetry makes nothing happen, Auden might have repeated were he there. And what wouldn't I give at this moment for his stiff British upper lip? What's one more death in the family, Otto Frank might have argued, expunging not grief, but sex from his daughter's diary. And what father would dare today to play jury or judge? 5. Are you writing another Holocaust poem, the angel of consciousness who sits while I muse on my right shoulder and whom I sometimes confuse with her errant 2-headed twin, the angel of conscience, asks? I'm thinking now of my own children, remembering my home office, the Akida etching above the desk, that angel, what's-her-name, holding Abraham's straining arm, the knife blade pointing downward. And when my son was born, I, exiled to the basement, forgot that picture, which hung 10 months above my wide-eyed boy's crib. I feel wicked sleeping in this warm bed, my daughter repeats, rehearsing her Anne Frank and pausing only occasionally for applause. 6. Burn everything after I'm dead, Kafka said, poking his pre-war Jewish head into yet one more of my poems. He's trying to explain the fatherland to the fatherless. No one reads poetry anymore anyway, my mother, quoting from her own unpublished diary, writes. And who doesn't want to go on living after their death, my daughter recites. I'm at my desk, buried again in this moldy basement, begging for quiet, while upstairs I can hear my great uncles, Abbott and Costello, arguing. And now they're chasing each other around the kitchen like Keystone Cops. And now they're singing each other's praises like Elliot and Pound. And now they're comforting each other like the angels of death and forgetfulness. 7. Quiet, I call out, castigating the offenders brought back buddy style, heads bowed and hand in hand. 2 pretty preteens caught hiding behind stacks of spectacles, confiscated suitcases, and desecrated scrolls. I want to face them toward this tearful tower of faces and teach them proper museum protocol. But they are still unapologetic, giggling and trading one-liners, these entertaining angels in training. I'd planned to quote Kafka or even Kipling, but it's clear I've lost control, and now I can't recall a single thing I came here to say. I am simply a young girl, badly in need of some rollicking fun, Anne whispers, as I open the door for a little air, letting her play, at least for today, out in the sun. Recital. Epigraph. Blessed is the Lord who trains my hands for battle, my fingers for warfare. Psalm 144. 1. The original poem. My hands braiding my daughter's hair before her recital are suddenly my grandmother's kneading the ceremonial Friday night challah, the same dark veins, the Tigris, the Euphrates, spreading life into each tributary. Or palms turned up, 8 trains arriving at the same station at the same time, 2 others already emptied and heading back out, boxcars with pet names like the racing boats of the wealthy, interior affairs, foreign policy, extermination, or elbows held close to the body, 10 escape routes and 2 shtetls, my great-grandmother in one, my great-grandfather in the other. I'm holding them both in my hands. I'm like God in that old camp song when my daughter starts to play and I, forgetting myself, clap and keep clapping. And I think maybe this world is God's boat and he calls it genocide, and the next world is also ours to share. 2. Foreign policy. Recital is the name of the poem I was reading at my first recital, my voice strung tight as young David's slingshot wore stretched between his sinewy hands. This is the battle he would sing about years later. But first, he had to learn to play the lyre, practice poetry and song, love and prayer. So much work just to celebrate his victory. Here he is at the slaughterhouse, choosing the sheep, cutting its guts. His grandmother, working beside him, keeps the casing fresh to ensure the sensuous quality of the sound. She separates the fat, removing the membranes except for the muscle fiber, while David, his thick thumbs bleeding now, braids the hanks. Music fit for a king. 3. Extermination. Recital is the name of the poem I was reading at my first recital, when in the back I heard somebody's grandmother shuffling down the hallway, her whole bridge game like Slavic barges in tow. And suddenly chairs were scraping all over the place. "Speak up," she says. "What are you saying?" I'm reading the numbers on her forearm, each numeral a poem written by God, perfect, meaningless, and containing all meaning, just as you'd expect in a poem by the poet laureate of all universes, of all religions, of all time. 4. Interior affairs. My wife's in the kitchen baking cookies for our daughter's recital when I sit down for breakfast. Somewhere, bombs are falling and children are starving. but I'm pouring the milk and the sugar, whistling a song, and nibbling the nape of my lover's neck on my way back to the refrigerator. And neither of us can guess who will eventually find the cunning enemy, cancer, hiding like a secret code ring in the cereal box of the body. 5. Battles. All this was years ago, but now I'm rereading Recital to my daughter, who turned out to be a pianist after all and is practicing for her own recital at the same North Shore Jewish nursing home. Her grandmother mired in the mud of the waiting list, and the whole family conspiring to maneuver her to the front of the line. She's the last soldier standing between me and my death. She's the ship of Tarshish heading over the edge of the horizon, and I'm the nameless little boat following. Her husband died in the War of the Streets, and her brother died in the war to end all wars, and her father died in the war before that. I want to die, not like Saul on the battlefield of my own sword, nor like Solomon, my house in disarray, but like David in his bed, reciting the Psalms, at war only with his own soul. 6. Lullabies. I'm in the back of the room listening to my daughter's recital, her fingers furiously pumping up and down, and now diminuendo toward the end, controlling the strings and valves of my heart. Maybe I am the sheep, sacrificing my inner life for the sake of her soul. Or maybe her palms and fingers resting face down on the keys are only her palms and fingers resting. I'm alone in the back of the room, a sentry guarding free cookies, which may not be eaten except in the recreation hall called the afterlife. Otherwise, who would sit still for the music? Half the audience deaf, and the rest already sailing home on the faint breath of the small boats they've christened battles and lullabies. I want to die, not like Goliath, a victim of modern warfare, nor like Uriah, innocent bystander turned love's collateral damage, but like David, a shepherd leading his flock to feed among the flowers. 7. The revision. Would you still love me, my daughter asks, if I'd played all the wrong notes? She's wondering what it means to be her, Jewish American and upper middle class in a time of war, when all she wants to think about is poetry and song. Would you still love me, my wife asks, if I were old, ugly, too thin, toothless? She's bombing her own body weekly, shrapnel embedded in the roof and walls of the holy house where we prayed and made love. Would you still love me, David asked his God, if I killed a man for no better reason than to take his beautiful wife as my lover? Would you still love me, I asked my father, if instead of fighting my own battles, I deserted, conscientiously objected, or sat on the sidelines writing poems without even once harnessing the power to revise my life like words on a page? Would you still love me, God asked my grandmother before his grand recital, if I wiped out your entire family, let's say all at once, leaving only one mostly dry, self-involved American tributary to tell the tale? Life, my grandmother explained to me, is not poetry, never was, and was never meant to be. Now, by way of answer, she wipes away the faint smudge of chocolate still fresh on God's lips. Your grandmother's one tough cookie, he whispers, while she rustles about, her chair scraping every which way. What, she asks, speak up, or no one will hear a word you are saying. As for your certain and coming death, she adds. I don't know if you're a religious man, but you might try praying. Your steadfast love is eternal. Do not forsake the work of your hands. Psalm 138. Listening to the names, Simchat Torah 5781. Listening to the names shouted at the Black Lives Matter rally, Breonna, George, Tamir. I think of my grandfather chanting each weekly Torah Parsha until all 79,847 words are recited. It takes a year, he'd explain, to complete the pronunciation of the full name of God. Today, all around me, I hear lovers sobbing and fathers praying for Sandra, Alitiana, Rayshard, Daniel, Michelle, Freddie, their names written with black fire on white fire, each letter seared into air and heart and stone. Murder not, saith the Lord, before ordering Moses to slaughter innocent Midianites, unleashing millennia of erudite exegesis on the translation of a single Hebrew word. Oh, Ora, Philandro, Alton, Akai, Stephan, I hear you on the sidewalks, in the parks, driving your cars, home in bed, as you plead for your mothers and beg your deities, repeating one name and then the other as we now shout out yours. Eric, Tanisha, Janisha, oh, Emmett, forever 14. Let me tell you, you who should be 79 in the new year of 5781, that tonight is Simchat Torah, when the scrolls will be taken from the ark as we worshipers dance and drink and sing with abandon until the dawn breaks, and the final verse of Deuteronomy is followed by the opening chapter of Genesis, both completing and beginning the cycle. If Torah is the blood of God, then let our names be God's body. Abel, Absalom, Er, Onan, Maurice, my father, Moshe, Mori, Mo, Mickey, Mike, murdered. See, Ratzah, the Hebrew root, as opposed to Harak, to kill, as in capital punishment. Stand your ground, ritual slaughter, temple sacrifice. For no crime, but living in the wrong neighborhood, worshiping the wrong God, which is no God at all. And now, writing our ancestors' names in black ink on white paper, I let the flames consume themselves before reading aloud. Solomon, Ina, Micah, Mordechai, massacred by the Polish Policia, Rachel, Yochanan, Esther, and Shmuel shot by the Schutzstaffel, literally the protection squadron. Blessing the children of Israel before his death, Moses addressed each soul individually. And what do we want but to be known and remembered? There are 2,415 proper names in Torah, my grandfather instructs, and every year we must recite them all. Today, 60 years later, I realize I still do not know how to listen. Speak, my mother once told me, only if what you have to say is more beautiful than silence. Every breath is both a transgression and a prayer. Let us live in the space between letters, between the act and its judgment. Botham, Michael, Kayla, Asher, let us assemble and listen to the names. Soon, those we love most will all be gone. Begin again. Be strong. Be strong. Let us strengthen each other. Dead Negro. Nothing is where I left it. The empty, littered lot next to my father's hardware store has turned up 2 blocks to the north. Even the store itself, which sold its last hammer and nail to the contractor who tore it down, putting this substandard duplex in its place, is missing. And the neighbors' children are now the neighbors. and the chalk outline of my father is rained from the gutter where he settled down with the bullet that killed him. Somewhere else, the murderer is murdering somebody else, but everything is the same in this poem where the poet misplaces his keys. My old Jewish neighborhood is filled with blacks, and the African American neighborhoods are busy with Asians, and the Mexicans are everywhere but here, in this dark bistro in the Soviet-era city of Pskov, 6 hours south of St. Petersburg. There is a dead Negro on the bar menu. The dead Jews, my father among them, rise up in protest like the benevolent protectors they once were. They are looking for the picket line, which is no longer where they left it. And the leftists have moved to the right, and God is looking for God everywhere. Nothing is where I left it. Not my hammer and sickle, not my Star of David, not my well-thumbed book of poems. My wife and children are nowhere to be found. Oh, Amachai, can you help me to find my keys in the pocket of the Palestinian boy moved into my Brooklyn home? His sister is missing, and his mother is not where he left her. It's enough to start anyone drinking. I'll have a dead Negro, somebody says from the next booth. A black man, maybe the one that killed my father. But in this light, I can't tell. Everyone is looking exactly the same. More money than God. More money than God, my father said again and again, shaking his head in disbelief at any ostentation. The neighbor's gold-plated knocker, we still banged fists, or my own lust to own the autographed edition or the waxed bronze bust. It is not only the idea, which should hold all the pleasure, but the poet's pencil marks on paper, which we treasure above the memorized poem. And so I fanned my flushed face, signaling the fast-talking auctioneer who has traced the provenance and picks up the pace, multiplying offers. And who now does my father's bidding? Heaven's coffers, perhaps, are for the destitute. But why did he have to die to escape the shitty, crime-ridden, never-to-be gentrified neighborhood of both our births? The cost of living, he would argue, is not the worth of being alive. But still, he checked each lottery ticket which littered the empty lot next door, praised their silver latex glitter, praying to the beautiful unscratched like little gods. Money talks, he taught me, but nobody beats the odds.